And now that everybody is able to drive in a private car, it's not a barrier anymore against people, poor people, black people, to travel to Jones Beach and other developments that Robert Moses created. It does imply further disciplining. As with the crash barriers, there's also the notion that people would not actually contest these overpasses and start to break them down in order to be able to get to Jones Beach. So there is a Foucauldian point as well. This is the sort of picture that people like Frank Geels then create out of this multi-level dynamics. And there you see very clearly the notion that things that start in a niche can expand, perhaps shift an ongoing patchwork of regimes, and over time perhaps influence the landscapes. And it looks perhaps like a sort of immaculate conception, these new innovations. Somehow they emerge and then they start to grow and change the world. But obviously they are embedded in regimes already and in existing landscapes and are shaped to some extent by that, while they also try to create new things. Back to the innovation journeys, we extended this idea of Van de Ven by locating them in what Michel Colomb has called poles. So you see science, technology, and then we put together regulation, market, society. We can expand on that as well, and perhaps one should. And you see a sort of phases from the new options to developing them, to actually create prototypes, introduce them in the market. Then there would be diffusion and perhaps wider changes. And the other thing, which I mentioned now already, is that we continue the journey. It's not, doesn't stop after the market introduction. Here are examples, all coming from physical technology, you could say, or technology that is mostly physical. And there are two interesting dynamics where at the development in the lab, say, or in some shop, on the shop floor, on the work floor, there you see that there are all sorts of promises, the resources given because of the promises. There will be, in a sense, protected spaces in which you can develop a novel technology which is not working very well in the beginning and has to be nurtured in order to become successful. So it needs, as it were, a protected space in order to survive at that early stage. And you have another kind of protected, not so protected space, but dynamics after at the time of the first market introduction. You have lead users, you have market niches, you have learning about introduction, and that again is a process with its own dynamics. And we show that, say, for electric vehicles and for green freeze, which is a environmentally friendly fridge, there it's, as it were, in this phase, more or less, while the computer has already gone through a regime shift in which, until about mid-60s, it was computing which was important, and the computer was substituted for all sorts of computing jobs and administrative jobs, while then it started to become the driver of all sorts of new things. So it became a computer regime, and it created its own further possibilities. There's more to say about this diagram and what we wanted to do with it, but I'll just continue and give just one point which I find important, is that these future developments are obviously uncertain. So this is gray now, well, it should have been gray, and this is, the beginning thing is black, but people have all sorts of ideas about it. And these ideas are not just empty projections, they actually are based on their experience with earlier innovations, and so they assume that there will be a sort of pattern which will not be the same as early, so nanotechnology will be different from biotechnology, but there will be, the pattern will be more or less the same, because it has these same dynamics. And then they start relying on shared expectations, including the road mapping that Werner already introduced. And there are extreme examples. So you probably know that in semiconductors, both the size and the speed, the size decreases, the speed increases almost regularly, particularly if you take a logarithmic scale. And this is Moore's law. And it's not exactly the same over the years, but it is more or less the same. And the interesting thing is that it's based on shared expectations, which are made forceful because they are part not just of a consortium, and they are part of a consortium which makes roadmaps, but also because there is this competitive game. We have to invest in the new generation, because otherwise, say the Americans, because otherwise the Japanese will do that before you, and you will lose the competitive battle. So you have to invest. The Japanese have exactly the same reasoning, and so the net effect is that everybody continues to invest, and you get this new generation, the factor of 4 every 3 years or so, in an almost law-like fashion. So this is an extreme example, but things like this occur. And again, it shows that there is something like a pattern, which has to do, it's not a natural law, but it's not a law of nature, but it is actually a regularity because of the way it is located and institutionalized. 3 comments on this. If you look at innovation studies, this is a critical comment on innovation studies, and you look at the success and failure question, which is important, obviously, then it is success and failure of something. So you have to fix the innovation that you're looking at as something which has its own properties, and then you can ask, was it successful, was it a failure? But in fact, the innovation evolves along the journey. So if you do these kinds of studies, it will always be a cross-section at a particular time of the innovation journey. And so while you're doing the evaluation, actually the innovation might be changing. To put it very briefly and show the irony almost, still you have to do these kinds of things, already because of accountability, you could say. But there is a sort of basic problem involved in it. What I intimated already in the beginning is that this visualization is of a pattern which is actually particular to industrial product and process innovation, where firms and other R&D organizations or technology development organizations can take the lead, somewhat independent of other actors. And there are other patterns, and I'll try to indicate how they might look like in a minute. So, in a sense, there is a bias here. It needn't be a bias, but if you say, well, this is what innovation is, the pictures, the visualization I was showing to you, then there will be a bias, because there are other dynamics and other patterns. And as I said already, this is the one I showed. You can see that what I was doing, I was following the enactors on their journey. I wasn't following other actors. These are backgrounded, and in a sense, you could sort of complain about that, and there are now sort of changes that product development in some areas is now a bit more interactive. There are attempts to engage future users at an early stage. So the thing is changing a bit, but not very much, because there are these strong dynamics because it is a firm which can take the lead, and so there's a specific division of labor involved in this particular pattern of innovation. Now, if you go to the other patterns, well, no, first the general point. When I say pattern, I mean something which is recognizable, also to some extent by the actors themselves, and is recurrent, so that you can actually base some of your thoughts about how things will go on your identification of the pattern. And industrial innovation is like that. And this institutionalization can actually be traced. You can start in the 19th century, and you can see how these various bits and pieces that were in my visualization have evolved, have stabilized, and now are becoming a sort of almost natural part of innovation, industrial innovation.